Hello again, this is Charlie Belfontaine, and you're listening to the Homebuyers Hour on WCPT AM 820, where the facts matter. And we are a show that talks about real estate and, more importantly, home buying advocacy. So any questions you have about you or your home or home buying, please give us a call. Each week we do bring in one special real estate agent, somebody that we consider to be a home buyer's advocate. But before we go ahead and introduce her, I want to go ahead and introduce our attorney in here. His name is Patrick Loftus of Loftus Law Group. Pat, how do people get hold of you, and tell us a quick story about you?
All right, it's actually not Loftus Law Group. That would...
Did I say group?
You did.
I apologize for that. I misspoke.
It would suggest that it's not just me, and it is just me.
Yeah. Which I think makes you unique, quite frankly, and special, because when somebody dials your number, do they get anyone else?
Well, I do have an answering service.
Okay.
So they might talk to my answering service, but if someone picks up and it's not the answering service, it would be me. Mm-hmm. Or if you text me, I would also respond, presuming it is during a normal time. Don't text me at 10 p.m. on a Saturday.
Right.
I don't like to practice law under the influence. I don't think it's a good idea.
I love it.
If you do want to call or text me, by all means, the number is 773-632-8330. The next person to text me from this program will be the first, and you will have a special designation, and I will be really excited.
We got to come up with that name for what that designation is, too, so that's going to be interesting.
Let's keep it a surprise.
I agree. So Joey Matthews, he's our mortgage officer. He's not going to be with us today, so we're going to move right on to our guest. Our guest was actually born and raised in Scotland. She moved here to the United States when she was 15 years old. She started in the investment business, and then she made a transition somewhere around 2012 into the real estate business. Her name is Lynn Harvie. She works with Baird & Warner. Lynn, please tell us a little bit more about yourself and what makes you unique, and about Baird & Warner, and how do people get hold of you?
Sure. Well, I've been in the industry for 11 years, and as you mentioned, I kind of initially got into it just to be an investor myself, not really with the intent of selling real estate on the market, but here I am 11 years later, and I'm with Baird & Warner. I've been with Baird & Warner my entire career. I'm very happy there, and if people want to reach me, I'm at 248-830-9439. That is a Michigan number. I've from Farmington Hills, went to high school there, and I've kept it. It's the same number I've had since high school.
Well, that's all right. I live up on the North Shore. My cell phone is a 630 number, so yeah. I get it.
It's a good conversation starter with people.
It really is. So normally we like to get together and chit-chat a little bit, and just after introducing you and listening just for a second, your eyes lit up, and I could see her here in the studio. You guys can't. But when she said Baird & Warner, you could see that she was very proud. Her head stood up and everything else, and her body language showed she was very proud of Baird & Warner. What makes you so proud of Baird & Warner?
I think for me, part of the reason why I joined the company is just the deep family roots. And I think when somebody puts their family name to a business, I mean, you're putting your name out there, you're putting your family out, and your reputation on the line. And I think that really spoke to me when I was looking for that right place to start my real estate career, and the long-standing history that they have here in the city. They're the reasons why we have fair housing laws. Lyman Baird was the one who paved the way for that. Baird & Warner and Steve Baird's the reason why we have Ravinia. They're why we have the 606.
Oh, I need this story on the Ravinia stuff. That's my neck of the woods where I live.
Yeah.
And I love that place
and
up there.
And most people don't know that, but Baird & Warner were involved in the planning of Ravinia and the venue and the housing around it. And so for them, it's not just about selling real estate. They're truly committed to their city, and I think that's important. That's a value of mine, and so I connected with it.
Nice, and the 606 trail and everything else that you said.
Yeah.
That is neat, and I definitely, if we have time, I do want to talk more about the history of that, because I'm really curious on it. But one of the things that we did talk about today, and usually one of my first questions is, what makes people unique? And you came up with some of, you made me smile when you were talking about, more so the education part, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to find out more, what makes you unique?
Yeah,
and successful?
Unique. I mean, I think maybe just because I'm not transactionally driven. It's just not who I am. I really want to love what I do every day. And when I get up, I want to have fun doing it. I want to feel good about doing it. And, you hear all the horror stories with buyers and, how horrible their experience is. And I think to be able to change that, to actually be able to take someone through the process and for them to be like, that was all right. That went well, compared, and I feel good about that at the end of the day, and that's important to me. So for me, I'm really a strong believer in educating the consumer. I don't want to be making decisions for them. I want my clients to, go online and look at a property the way I would look at a property, and go to an open house and ask the questions that I would ask, if I went to a showing with them. And
what are some of those questions? What should people be asking?
Sure. I mean, and obviously here in Chicago we have we're condo centric, right? I mean, for the majority, and so there comes a lot of complexities with associations and reserves and all those types of things. So educating my clients on how decks and bylaws work and how the rules and regs work and how do these buildings plan for roofs and masonry and lintel painting and all these things that they don't think about.
Part of the general maintenance. Yeah,
part of the general maintenance. I think because some people think, I'm just responsible for the walls in. I'm buying a condo, and therefore I don't have the responsibility. But at the end of the day, you're cutting the check, and I don't want my clients to buy a property, move in, and then all of a sudden realize that they, are going to have a special assessment, and do they understand what a special assessment is? And so all those types of things. I want a client to ultimately be able to go to an open house without me and ask all the questions and get informed.
You bring up a good point. And sometimes I take things for granted. I assume, well, if I know what it means, then everybody knows what it means. But Patrick, if you don't mind, what is a special assessment? What does she mean by that, and how does that affect me as a homeowner?
Oh, God, don't make me talk about that.
Sorry, it may be boring to you, but somebody doesn't know.
Right. So when you live in a condominium, of course, you're not the one who's shoveling the snow usually or mowing the lawn. That's handled by the association, and everyone has, I think, gets this visceral feeling when they hear about an association. But it's part of condo life. Now, the association develops a budget, an annual budget, and that's depending on what small percentage of that building you own as the unit owner, that determines your share of that budget. Now, a portion of that budget should be dedicated to reserves. A reserve is an account that is maintained by the association, not for the regular operating expenses, like I mentioned, grass cutting, shoveling snow, if you have a dormer, if you have a pool, all these things, insurance. The reserve, rather, is for capital improvements, meaning I got to replace a roof, I've got to do tuck pointing, whatever it is. If something happens, either there is a replacement needed, let's say the roof costs $15,000 to replace. If the reserve account only has $10,000 in it, then the money to replace that roof doesn't come from some magical place. It comes from the unit owners.
I do like the small numbers you're using.
I know. I was
by the way, on the roofs, were you?
I was like, I wish I could get a roof replaced for $15,000.
That's why I could get my garage roof done for $15,000. I'm not sure.
And that's
we need his vendors. That's what it is.
Well, if my vendor is not charging enough, the first question you should ask is why. But that's why, of course, the team is important, right? I'm not necessarily expected to have expertise in how much it would cost to replace a roof. That's where I lean on my professional inspector, my capable professional real estate agent, and so. Okay, I got derailed. Special assessment.
No, that's all right. I do that to people.
Yeah.
The special assessment, that's where the association gets the money. And so they figure out, okay, we're short. I'm going to use the small number again, $10,000. And if you are a 33% owner in that building, then $3,333 is coming out of your pocket.
Right.
It's something that you should expect it to happen, just as a matter of preparation, but there are a lot of there's a lot of factors in terms of how much might it be, what kind of building are we talking about, but it's money that you might not have expected to pull out of your pocket that you're going to have to find the money for. So it's something amongst the thousands of things that needs to be taken into consideration before you sign your name on the dotted line.
Well, Lynn, you were talking about education and getting your clients and having them ask the questions that you would ask. I know there's operational costs for running a condo association, and then Patrick was explaining the reserves or the, coming in there, and I know there's reserve studies. What do you think is a proper amount or percentage, that somebody should have in their reserves before your clients are going to start getting nervous, or you're going to get nervous for your clients?
Yeah.
There's a tough question.
It is a tough question, and because
question.
actually there is no rule of thumb as to what is considered adequate in reserves or operating expense, accounts. From a lender perspective, they expect to see 10% of gross annual income in the reserves, and if that's not there, you might run into an underwriting issue. There is no clear-cut, XY percent needs to be in reserves in an association, because everyone's philosophy on how they want to run their association is going to be very different. I think what's important is if you go to a building and they say, you've got a 3-unit building, very standard building in Chicago, and maybe there's only $2,000 in reserves, and you say, well, why? Well, we just replaced the roof. Oh, okay, kind of makes sense. Or maybe we just tuck pointed and we just cut a big check for tuck pointing and such. So you can. I typically ask the questions of what projects have been done in the past 5 years, and
that's a good one.
What projects are coming up in the next few years.
Nice.
So you can kind of determine if that's going to be adequate. I mean, there's no, like I said, no set rule. But if I went to a showing with a client and the realtor said, there's $2,000 in reserves, and by the way, we're probably the roof's 20 years old, and we don't really tuck point on a regular basis, and I'm probably
That's a lot of money.
I'm probably bringing that to my client's attention, because in that situation, then they are most likely going to be faced with ongoing special assessments to bring that building up to par. And again, that's ultimately my client's decision if they feel comfortable doing that, but I just have to let them know the pros and the cons of associations that run slim like that.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on, when I'm looking at it from the lawyer's perspective, there's a few factors that I take into consideration in terms of advising the client. First is, I think, as you alluded to, the size of the building. 150-unit building is going to be handled differently than a 3-unit building.
Good point.
With a 150-unit building, I want to see that they're following best practices, standard practices. So one great thing is if they have a reserve study, is you can see where are they in terms of the reserve study. The reserve study will essentially tell you how much they should have in reserve, and you can compare that to how much they have in reserve.
Right.
And that's a good way to figure out whether they can be expected to have a special assessment upcoming. Notwithstanding, sometimes things happen unexpectedly. I know my own personal experience in my building, they discovered a building defect that I'm just going to ballpark it, cost the association ballpark $3 million to rectify. It was no fun. We did not have $3 million budgeted.
a lot of money.
It's a lot.
We
Divided by how many people?
We have 184 units.
100. Okay, well that makes it a lot easier, but it's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I don't have $3 million, and I didn't have my percentage of the $3 million either at the time. We financed it, so that was fine. But that can happen. You don't budget for discovering a construction defect that no one knew about. So that's, I guess, part of the dice roll, if you will. On the other hand, like a 3-unit building, as you were referencing, that's a little bit of a different animal, because if you've got 3 unit owners, you may, instead of fully funding a reserve, you may not want to have $40K in a reserve account, of these 3 unit owners' money that's just sitting there doing nothing. You might instead say, look, we're going to charge a low monthly assessment with the notion that when it's time to replace a roof, when it's time to do tuck pointing, whatever it is, we're all going to stick our hands in our pockets. We'll keep that money. We'll keep our own money so that we can do what we need to do with it, invest it, whatever it is. At the end of the day,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's the education of the client, letting them know that this is what you can reasonably expect, this is why this is this way, then they can make an informed decision. They might say, man, I am really bad with money. I can't have it where, at some point I might have to write a check for $8,000. And so you'd say to that person, well, this may not be the one for you, or let's see if we can make that part of the negotiation with the seller. Or they might say, I really like the idea that I'm only going to pay $150 a month assessment. I will save myself and make wise but safe investments with that money.
Yeah,
it's not a bad option.
Forced savings is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but to Patrick's point, you have to advise the client
And let them make their decision, right?
And advise them of the possibilities. And, I always say to my clients, just put a little money aside in your own savings account, your own bank account for a rainy day. It's going to rain. So don't be caught off guard with it. But what I do like about the lower assessment buildings is that, the buying power of that buyer goes up significantly when you're not spending $700 a month on assessments for a 1-bedroom just because, it's got a pool or a dorm and such.
Yeah. I was just out of curiosity looking at listings in a particular building that I really like, and I was like, $1 million. Could I afford that someday? And I was thinking, trying to do the math, figuring out what I can chop out of the budget. And then I looked at the assessment is $1,200 a month, and I go, if I had $1 million to buy a house, I wouldn't buy one with another $1,200 payment on top of it.
And I honestly tell my clients, assessments never go down. There's actually one unique case in 2019, actually, where a Gold Coast building voted to reduce their assessments, and that was the first time that had ever really significant in such a large scale had happened, because they only ever go up. And I try to advise my clients that because it's just money out the door.
And there's
Yeah,
going to be
that's the
some sort of
expectation.
COLA or cost of living, raise that's going to have to go into the building as well.
That's right.
And as long as you think of the building as a person, I guess, or an entity, then that's going to come in there.
Yeah.
We did have a conversation, and I shared a story with, that happened to me yesterday about, I had a past client call me back. They were buying a condo up in Evanston. They were looking for something that they could live in for 6 months and that they could rent out short-term rental for 6 months. And, the real estate agent just, and I should be more clear, the buyer's agent or selling agent, they went ahead and just got the condo documents, or they just asked for the condo documents, and they were given something from 2012 without any amendments on it. So when they reviewed the documents, it said that, it did not exclude short-term rentals. But after they put the earnest money, signed a contract, hired the home inspector, flew in from Houston to go ahead and attend the home inspection, see everything, invested all this money, they find out, a few weeks later that they did have an amendment, or is it an addendum? I think it's an addendum. Amendment, thank you for correcting me. He did have an amendment that said that short-term rentals are no longer allowed in the building. And then I'm aiming this question at you. How would you approach, not now, but then, how would you approach this if you're going into buying a house or a property and your client wants short-term rental to be part of it? How do you find out for sure for our client to save them that horrible roller coaster ride?
Sure. Obviously it takes a lot of due diligence up front to get that kind of information.
Takes a lot of knowledge up front to be able to do the due diligence. That's the kicker, and that's what I'm trying to dig.
Yeah, so for me, my first red flag is somebody wanted to buy in a condo building with an Airbnb, to be perfectly honest with you.
With a what?
If somebody wants to buy in a condo building and wants to be able to Airbnb it, that's really my first conversation with the client, because the majority of the time that's not happening.
Yeah, there's only, to my knowledge, there's only a few in Chicago that are known to be, let's say short-term rental friendly.
Correct. And you can actually go on, there's a registry. The city does carry a registry where you can go on
That's
and
interesting.
you can pull an address and find out if that building is not allowing Airbnb. I always say to my clients, more often than not, in a condo building, you will not be allowed to do short-term rental. I will always ask. And, asking the listing agent for condo docs is one step, and something that specific where it's really, the deal is really hinging on whether or not this buyer can use the property the way they intend. I'd probably take it a step further and call the management company if there is a property manager managing that property and hear it straight from the horse's mouth. If there is no property manager, you can actually go on to the recorder of deeds, because anytime they change and implement bylaws or make amendments, they do need to be recorded. So just by pulling the pin on the condo, you should be able to see those documents. I mean, granted, in recent years with the pandemic, there's some delay in recording of documents, but for the most part, you should be able to get that information pretty readily.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You were going to
Yeah.
hit that?
Look, I have a couple things to say about this. Number one is the point of due diligence is to, for one, determine if there are any deal breakers. And so the fact that he spent some money in connection with the due diligence, if it reveals something that is a deal breaker, then that was money well spent, first of all.
Agreed.
When I get a client who goes, well, I spent $300 on an inspection, I really don't want
Whoa.
to walk away from it.
Whoa. Up that price. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah, 300. That's what who are you referring? Discount inspection services? I know it's not us. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh.
We pay
I'm
our
loving your
guys more
pricing,
than
Patrick.
that,
I mean,
yeah.
that's 1990s pricing right there.
I live in a pre-inflation world, I guess.
You're awesome. I
Take
love
us
it.
back, please.
I
Take us with you.
apologize for interrupting you with that. I'm sorry.
My client comes to me and says, I've spent $5,000 on the inspection.
There you go. Now you're talking.
I'm already in the hole that much, and I want to move forward, even though the inspection revealed some deal breakers for me. I said, look, that's you've made an investment in something that is going to save you. Instead of spending that $5,000, it's essentially saved you from spending $30,000. So the choice is cut your loss at $5K, or continue down the path and experience a loss of $35K. Which is the better option? So that's number one. So you bought a plane ticket from Houston, you paid an inspector, whatever it was. You spent that money for a reason, and it's not always going to pan out. There are sometimes due diligence is in that process. You're going to discover something that is whoops, can't do it now.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I want to continue this conversation, and I'm going to get the floor back to you in that, but we're 20 minutes in, and I do want to go ahead and get our information out there. Patrick, how do people get hold of you?
If you're going to interrupt me,
I am going to interrupt you. I'm
interrupt
sorry.
me to give out the information that I'm essentially here to give out, then all right, I can live with that. Email me, patrick@loftus.law.
Keep it simple. I like that. Joey Matthews of the Federal Savings Bank. His phone number is 630-235-2405. Lynn, how do they get hold of you, please?
They can certainly call me, 248-830-9439, or lynnharvie.beardwarner.com, and all my information's right there.
Terrific. And I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. My name is Charlie Belfontaine. Our website is www.thehomeinspectors, that's plural, O-R-S, and it's a .com. And our phone number is 312-544-9180. And Patrick, you were talking about due diligence before I interrupted you. Please continue. And then Lynn, I'm coming to you on the same subject, all right?
Now, so it ultimately falls upon the buyer to do the necessary due diligence. Now, that said, if the buyer hires the right people, that due diligence may not end up being quite so expensive. So they hire Lynn. Lynn is going to go and find out before they even get under contract whether or not there are potential issues with Airbnb. And
this is what I want to ask her and talk about. This is where we can, and in fact, I'm going to switch it over to you right now, Lynn. There's good agents and there's great agents. And don't get me wrong, Patrick, I am not arguing with you, all right? I respect the fact that the due diligence and the money and everything else comes in for good warnings. But if we could save our clients that money, by getting them this information or pointing out some of those ideas before they sign the contract, before they put earnest money down, before they, I mean, in fact, if I remember right, this attorney didn't even get paid on that transaction because it didn't go to closing, you know, when it happened. So, Lynn, I want to aim it at you a little bit. What can you do, you know, or how do you feel about what I mentioned, you know, happened to my client, or what can you do to prepare, you know, protect them, prepare?
Sure. I mean, of course, you can't account for every single thing.
No, but we can try.
But we can certainly try. And, you know, I do most of my due diligence. There are some agents who believe that find the house, put it under contract, attorney review period is to deal with due diligence, and that's fine. But that's not how I like to operate. My fall through rate on deals is extremely low because I ask the questions about the association up front.
That's something that actually should be tracked. All right, they'll track the number of units you move. They'll track, you know, how much is sold.
Correct.
But how many deals get canceled?
Yeah.
I think
Correct.
that's something that should be tracked.
And actually, when I look at mine,
mine,
the ones that are canceled are the ones I've told my clients that this is probably not the right place.
okay.
So, you know, I will run a building's financing and if there's lawsuits in the building. Not every lawsuit's a deal breaker, right? I mean, just because an association has a lawsuit, it can be something petty like, you know, awnings outside and, you know, things like that.
I could tell you a couple stories.
I could tell you plenty stories. But the reality is, knowing the questions to ask and asking the right questions, and continuing to pursue things before you let a client make an offer,
Okay.
and then being able to maybe run the finances by the lender, sending it through automated underwriting, making sure that the building would clear, you know, all the barriers ahead of time, and collecting condo docs. I'm actually surprised with the number of listing agents who do not already have condo docs. That shocks me.
They
Well,
mostly
can't you
don't.
put that on the MLS? Is there a way to hide that so that only other brokers could see it, or am I
I
mistaken?
mean, they don't even need to post the documents on the MLS. I mean, it's literally as simple as referencing reserves, upcoming projects, recent projects, rental caps. If there's a rental cap, what is the percentage of the restrictions? You know, it's not hard. It's just effort.
Yeah,
Why do you
it's
guys
not.
think?
There's, I mean, I would say that most associations, at least of any size, they'll use Homewise, which I could go on a rant about those folks.
I like Homewise. I use it a lot. I'm sorry. Really? Both of you, huh?
We'll talk later.
We
Yeah.
do need to talk, you know? I use that
That's a
quite
whole
a
other
bit.
show.
Yeah, I got beef. I got beef.
Oh, I want to hear, yeah.
But if there's an upfront cost associated, right? I don't think most listing agents are prepared to front their client $400 for the condo docs and disclosures. They'd rather leave it up to after they're under contract. So that would be one way, and quite frankly, I think would be recommended in terms of get this information out there as quickly as possible. I mean, the time that goes by after you get under contract and you finally get these condo docs, if something is discovered at that point, that's the only thing you can't get back is the time. You can get the earnest money back. You can get, you can't get the inspection money back because they've already done it. They did the work. They should get paid. But again, I guess that's another factor in favor of getting those documents sooner than later, because just discover that thing as quickly as possible. That way you're not feeling sore about a drop of money on an inspection or whatnot. If it's a smaller building, they may not use Homewise. I mean, it'll be a little bit more of a chore to get your client to dig all that stuff up, but get it done.
And to be honest with you, and it always comes back to this, I think, when you educate your seller as to why it's important to have that information and how it will help speed up the attorney review process, which ultimately allows them to collect their balance of earnest money and ultimately allow the buyer to get underwritten and they're clear to close. You know, when you educate your seller as to why it's important, then they should not even think twice about spending $400 on condo documents, because they're like, oh, you're right. I need to make sure I have this information because as a listing agent, I need to be able to understand the building and what kind of standing it's in, and understand the buyer from their pre-approval and all that. And is this a good match? And what are the odds of this getting to closing?
Yeah, you're going to spend that money one way or the other.
One way or the other.
If you're selling a condo, either I'm almost always ordering those condo docs myself.
And when you say I, are you talking about I as the attorney, or are you talking about I as the seller?
I as the lawyer.
I as the lawyer for the seller, or for the buyer, or for both?
For the seller.
For the seller.
I would rarely do that on behalf of the buyer. I can think of some situations where I might end up doing that, but by and large, it would be something, a cost that I would incur on behalf of the seller that I would get reimbursed at the closing, or, if for some reason it falls through, but almost always at the closing.
Yeah. I collect them up front when I do a listing.
Yeah, I mean, you're the first person I've heard that is actually willing to take that step, and I really think, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke here. I think that's really great. I mean,
I think it's my job.
It's music to my ears.
I think it's my job for my seller to do that. They don't know what they don't understand the importance. My job is to teach them and show them, and get their home sold.
Yeah.
And also eliminate possible roadblocks, especially the common ones that are going to be happening. If we know that this is going to be an issue, let's be transparent about it, get it out there, and this way we're saving everybody a bunch of time and energy and money. Am I wrong in that statement?
Absolutely.
wrong.
I had a situation, it was years ago, where I asked for condo docs, and this agent's actually an excellent agent, really like this agent a lot. And long story short, we get the 22.1 document, and
What is that?
that is a disclosure statement that the
Okay.
associations, Patrick can dig into
Yeah.
that, but
No, I've seen the disclosure forms. I never knew the number associated.
Yeah, that's called a 22.1. And it turned out that one entity owned 70% of the building. It was
Uh-oh.
unwarrantable, meaning my client's financing was not going to get approved. Now, not only is then my buyer's paid for inspection and whatever, and their loan application
Probably
fee
an
and such,
appraisal.
but this listing agent had paid for staging. Wonderful staging. She had painted the house. She had staged the house. She had done open houses and everything. And it was great. And I'm like, you just spent all that money.
And now she's going
And
to
you
go back
didn't
on the
know
market.
that you couldn't sell that to a conforming loan.
It has to be a cash
Has to
buyer,
be a cash
basically.
buyer.
Oh, man.
And she was on, and this was pre-pandemic when it was taking, in some areas taking a little longer to sell properties. What a waste.
That is a conversation in its own. I wouldn't mind touching on it a little bit. I mean, if you're listing a property, first of all, you don't get a down payment from a seller, right? Do you take any money in your pocket when you list a property? And I knew the answer to that, so forgive me for being if it sounded a little snarky at all.
No.
But you're investing your own personal money too,
Correct.
right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you invest in?
I mean,
Photography, right?
Yeah, photography.
'Cause that's important, isn't that? You got to
videography.
get a good picture nowadays.
Yeah, it's your first
Yeah.
impression. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
I've seen a lot
I mean,
of
people are
iPhone pictures
making-
on there too. I
yeah.
thought that was awesome.
Yeah, people are making their decision about whether to see a house based on photographs. And if they're not good, that you will be skimmed by. But yeah, I pay for high-def photos, videography, 3D tours, floor plans, staging and organization if I need it. I pay for a lot of things up front. I mean, we don't get paid if we don't close the deals, so...
No, and even more is the time invested, because
it's the time.
I mean, that's the one thing you cannot get more of.
That's right. That's right.
That's really interesting, and that's a big risk that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration. What about on the buyer's end, though? Are you investing any? I know there's time and showing and things like that, but is there any other financial investments that you have to make with the buyer?
Not so much. Maybe parking tickets because you're doing showings, but that's maybe about it.
I don't know if we should edit that out or not. Do we just incriminate ourselves? I love it.
No, I pay them.
Do you? So then
Oh,
it's
sure.
all good.
Oh, I
Yeah.
admit fault. I just take my odds on whether or not I get one.
Yeah, you better pay one. You come out of showing a house, you got a boot on your
boot
car.
on my car,
Oh,
yeah.
man, that's not good luck.
Yeah. it's not-
We actually had an agent on the show that does not own a car.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
I do.
And he loves the idea because he ends up talking with his clients in the back seat of the Uber, going from place to place and building his relationship. But I don't know, all that stuff goes in
Yeah.
there. I'd like to go back to a little bit about three different things, and I think this has to do with your sponsoring broker, and I'm going to need your help on it, all right? So you mentioned three services. One is called Contract Care, another one is called Listing Launch, and then the Balance Program. Pick one of those, tell me who does it, and tell me a little bit about those.
Sure. Well, those are all things that Baird Warner offer.
And Baird Warner is a sponsoring broker.
Is the sponsoring broker.
Okay.
Baird Warner is my sponsoring broker, and they offer to their agents three different platforms that they can use to help manage their transactions, from contracting or signing that listing agreement to actually getting it on the market. The one that I most heavily use is Contract Care. So from when I get a property or buyer under contract, I loop in my transaction coordinator, Brenda, and Brenda is on that transaction the rest of the way. My clients get to know her. She is close with my attorney, and she typically knows the lenders and keeps everybody in the loop and helps to, obviously we go out on appointments as agents and we're tied up on showings and different things. So having somebody who's constantly overlooking that file and making sure that we're hitting all our milestones, that's basically what Contract Care do for us. So there's no need for me to have, it's just me. I don't have an assistant. I don't have a team. I run everything myself. But having Brenda there to oversee things when I'm, caught up for periods of time, I'm not worried about getting documents to people in a timely fashion or responding in a timely way, because I know Brenda's watching over everything.
I mean, that sounds like it really frees you up to be present with the client, and you're not saying, "Hold up, I gotta take this," or tapping away at emails all the
Correct.
time. I can imagine if I'm a client and my real estate broker is constantly doing that, that's a big turnoff. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate how that's a really huge help.
Yeah,
for
and there
you.
was definitely times, when you go out with buyers, you can be seeing 6 to 8 properties. I'll be honest, anything more than 6 in a given block of time gets a bit blurry. Not even just for the buyer, but also for us. And it's a long time to be away from your email. And there was a period of time when you'd be out on showings for a couple hours and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get back to my inbox and this is going to be ugly. And now I don't worry about it, because I know, if anything, now when I'm opening my inbox, it's all these responses from Brenda, and I'm able to just sort of track along and see. And then it's nice because my buyers or my clients have somebody that they can contact if they can't get a hold of me. But I've never had a client say they can't get a hold of me.
So in a way, you're overwatching everything. They're communicating all the different steps. You see the check boxes are being checked and the I and the crosses of the T's and all that.
Correct.
So that's all good. What about this listing launch? What is that?
Yeah, listing launch is sort of similar, but from the listing side, from the minute my sellers sign a listing agreement, I loop in Maddie, and Maddie's working with me to prepare the MLS draft, organize photos, schedule all that type of stuff, collect condo documents, make sure the disclosures are all completely filled out
I like
correctly.
how you're going back to the important stuff earlier. That's good. Reaffirm it. That's important stuff.
It's getting all this, she's helping me do all those things, and coordinate all of that. And so she works with me all the way to getting the property up and onto the MLS, and then doing the initial marketing of it. But she's there making sure that all these documents are filled out correctly.
I like that. And that's just for the list only.
That's just for the listing side.
And
Yeah, I
then
mean,
here-
that's
Oh, go ahead, Pat.
That's preparation. It can take a lot of different forms, right?
Yeah.
You could take a listing, enter the information onto the MLS, and say, well, it's out there in the world.
That's right.
That is one type of preparation, but what you just described is several levels above that, which I think a client would really appreciate if they understood how much more they're getting out of that situation.
And for me, when I actually go to the photo shoots for the properties, my photographer's doing his thing, and we've worked together for years, so I don't feel like I need to hover around him and watch what he's doing. I'm typically going around the house and looking at the age of the furnace, the age of the condenser, the age of the appliances.
Get out of here. Come on.
I'm finding the water
I'm
shut
going
off.
to throw the baloney flag out on that one.
I'll show you a spec sheet.
You're telling me that you know how to figure out age of air conditioners and
Sure.
furnaces.
Sure.
I am
Everybody should be. It's right there on the furnace. And there's
I
ways to
think
do
you
it.
are
even-
now my favorite real estate agent. And if you think I say that to everybody that walks in the studio,
Who
you're
does?
100% right.
Who
I
does?
do. But today, it's you.
I actually teach my clients how to find it.
I've been starting, I've been starting this 1-minute broker tips on Facebook and YouTube, and those, how to decode the furnaces, how to decode the air conditioning, and all the common stuff that somebody can see and identify that might end up being a deal killer. And instead of me sending one of my guys in there to be the bad guys,
That's right.
I'd rather you catch that during the showing, because guess what? There's no emotions yet. And once you guys sign that paper and once that whole process begins, now there's money, there's a lot of emotions that are happening in here.
Charlie, you and I should start our own real estate brokerage, and then we will require all of the brokers under us to know all this stuff, and we're just going to mop the floor, right?
Well, here's the hard question then. Why don't we see more pre-listing? In California, it's like 99% of the time, any transaction is going to have a pre-listing inspection with the inspection report tied to the property. Why do you guys, both of you, this is for, why do you guys think that we don't do that here?
That's a good question. I had not considered it. There are a handful of municipalities around the area that do have they have a point of sale inspection, a pre-listing point of sale inspection. So Elmwood Park is one that comes to mind. So you literally need to get someone out. Now they're looking at it from a different perspective than you are as a building inspector. I could only speculate as to why we do things differently here than they do in California. One would be, we've always done it this way.
I hate that so
not the greatest reason to do something.
No,
right?
but it's a truthful one.
The other one would be from the more cynical side of myself, which is that we don't want to force sellers to learn things about their property that they would then have to disclose, and
saddens me.
then they would feel bad about disclosing it, and we take a much more caveat emptor, buyer beware approach here in Illinois.
What about you, Lynn? What do you see?
I mean, I think partly maybe sellers just don't want to spend the money on an inspection, for one. I mean,
You're even more cynical than I am.
That's a legitimate reason. I could buy into that.
It's hard to get sellers sometimes even just to paint or stage, and these are things that will really change.
Or take the dirty socks off the floor.
Yeah, it can be hard. It can be hard. So then asking them to spend money on an inspection, that might be harder. At least when I sit with my sellers and I'm meeting them and talking about getting the property, one of my questions is there anything in the house that's not working right, or you've had a problem with that, or it came up in the past? Let's walk around the house.
Let's fix it.
And fix it or disclose it, right? I mean, it's that simple. Fix it or disclose it. It's whatever you want to do, but it's taking the time to do that.
The other thing that comes to mind is that if I'm a buyer and the seller hands me an inspection from the inspector they hired, I'm still getting my own inspection.
Correct.
Because
And you
I
should.
don't trust that guy.
I would agree. You should. Where it comes with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be consistent if I said, well, the buyer is responsible for their own due diligence and should take everything that the seller says in context, which is to say, assume that they are telling you the bare minimum, if even that, and then say, well, this seller's provided me with an inspection report. I'll just take that at face value and not hire my own. Who's the seller going to hire? They ain't hiring you. They're hiring someone who is going to give them what they want.
You're listening to Patrick Loftus. Patrick, and we are coming back to this. How did they get hold of you, Patrick?
Yes, 773-632-8330. Call or text.
Terrific. And Lynn Harvie at Baird & Warner, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, 248-830-9439.
And you have a website too?
Yes, lynnharvie.bairdwarner.com.
Nice. And then I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors, and our phone number is 312-544-9180, and our website is www.thehomeinspectors.com. And going back to, again, both of you, I really love hearing all this stuff, especially when it comes to inspections and stuff, obviously, because that's my passion, where it comes into stuff. But it was explained to me that doing a pre-listing or home buying, I guess, because it is relationship, the whole process, is that when you want somebody to fall in love with the house, it's kind of like dating, it was explained to me. If, are you going to put up there that you're bipolar and You know, you got all these medical problems and stuff like that. You're going to put that in your, I don't know, what is it now? It's
Tinder
been a while.
profile?
Is it Tinder? Or I thought it was like Plenty of Fish. I remember one like
Jesus.
that. But am I dating myself? I don't know. It's going back. I'm on round 2. So,
Well, listen, I don't want to. Yeah, if I say that I know a lot about this, I know that my wife is watching. Okay? And my love, я тебе люблю.
oh, that's right. I think I know what that means. You know,
It's I love you in Russian.
that's what I like to hear. So, but what about that, man? Do you think that's a rational reason that we don't want to go ahead and put negatives out there?
For me, I'm just a transparency person, to be totally honest with you. Tell them now, or they'll find out later. So let's just lay it on the table. Let's be transparent. That's, for me, in building trust, I would feel better for my buyer to go on a showing, and for the agent to say, listen, just FYI, we know the furnace is old. We know that the window seal is broken in the primary, and the jacuzzi tub does not work. And just tell me, because that to me will create a smoother transaction. So with my sellers,
I couldn't agree more.
I just tell them, just tell me what's not working. Tell me where the deficiencies are. Let's problem solve. Is it something that we want to repair? Is it something we just want to disclose? And lay it out there. And then there's no surprises. And that's just how the space I operate from.
Yeah, and I think if you this may sound this might paint myself in a bad light, but you can own the narrative then by saying the furnace is 25 years old, but if it's we've it's worked like a charm, or however you want to, you can position it that way. It's not, number one, a surprise, and then from there, the buyer then assumes that you are hiding stuff from them.
Right.
That transparency, you can take that from this is a wart that the property has to actually, sometimes you can actually, make that a feature rather than a bug.
That's right. And I had a situation actually this past year, and with the way the market was, we were seeing a lot of as-is transactions, right?
Right. Oh my God, so
Buyers
many.
having to sort of cave into these sellers' demands because they didn't really have any cards in their pocket. And in one of the situations, my client was totally fine with as-is, and we went back to the listing agent and just said, hey, is there anything? Can we just put this out on the table? And she said, nope, there's nothing. Nope, my sellers aren't aware of anything. Now, if those sellers were not aware that their ice maker and water dispenser and the fridge was not working, I find that very hard to believe. And it sounds silly, but it's the quickest way to sour a deal because it's not about the ice maker and the water dispenser. It's about lack of trust and transparency. So,
Yeah, that trust is tissue paper thing, and any small thing can absolutely sever it.
Exactly. And so I tell just put it all out there, because having that strong trust and that disclosure and transparency, you have a smooth deal. Everyone's going to feel good about it, and we'll get ultimately everybody to the finish line. But something like that where it was so obvious that they must have known, like you can't tell me that you didn't know that one of the burners on your stove wasn't working. I just find that really hard to believe. And so for my clients, I'm like, I don't care how small this item is, lay it out there.
Yeah.
And, just last week we were talking about something that happened with a friend of mine. She bought a house down in Florida, and this time we had trust in the sellers of the home, but, my friend lost trust in the real estate agent, because when Hurricane Ian went through, and this house was in Fort Myers, she wanted to know, how's the house? How's everything in there? And they kept telling her everything's fine. And it's like, that's fine isn't really good. We need specifics. How much water got in there? Where did it get in? And so forth. And it wasn't until we were able to get a friend there, because the real estate agent, I went there, everything looked fine. And they kept saying that. But we got somebody in there, and then the owner said, we had an inch of water, came up to this far here. This is what we're doing for it. The hot tub got washed away. The dock got washed away. The owner was remarkable. But she canceled the deal because of loss of trust, all right, with the real estate agent. And I don't think it was a good financial decision. I love her dearly. She's a very close friend, and I want her to be happy. But I just, to me, it's the value of trust. And you triggered me a little bit when you said that, and I don't mean it in a bad way. But it just goes on how important that is. And, I mean, how much time do you think you spend building trust with your clients? And I know you don't force it, right? You're trying to be
Sure.
yourself, and you're letting them know, hey, listen, I'm just going to be upfront. I'm going to be
Sure.
honest. I'm going to be me. You know, and you're going to get to me because that's the only way. If I'm fake, you're not going to trust me.
Sure. You know, I think now later in my career, it tends to come around easier because my business is majority referral and past clients and repeat clients. So I already have that deep-rooted trust with them, and if they're referring their friend, they're saying, you know, we use Lynn, and you know, we had a great experience, and
It's flattering, isn't it?
it is. Honestly, it's the you know, you can get awards and all these different things, but a client referring you someone,
Speaks for itself.
it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, I would say, honestly, in terms of, building trust, you're never not in that position of building trust with somebody because you have something that you're protecting them from. They are vulnerable, and you're the one who is in the way of that bad thing happening to them.
And they're trusting us to protect them.
And if you're not mindful of the fact that trust
Yeah.
is, don't take it for granted. You
No.
cannot.
And
And
too many of us do.
as soon as you take it for
Yeah.
granted, that's when you start to lose the plot.
Yep.
I couldn't agree more on that stuff. And we're coming up towards the end of time, and I like to just get a few more words of wisdom that come into play. So, Lynn, one more time, please tell us about how they get hold of you.
Cell phone number 248-830-9439, and my website lynnharvie.bearwarner.com.
And if you can give a buyer one piece of advice in order to help them find, a true home buying advocate for themselves, a real estate agent professional, what would be one of the most important things you would ask somebody? I know it's a hard question,
Sure.
but I'm going to ask anyway.
I would say interviewing multiple realtors.
And what are they looking for, though?
They are looking for experience, homes sold in the past 24 months, volume sold in the past 24 months, asking them, about how they handle, how do they approach financing conversation? What could they teach them about inspections? And it's hard, but it's having an experienced agent who does probably north of 20 deals a year is you're hopefully in good hands at that point because it's no easy feat to do that many deals a year.
No, and the bar for entry for real estate and home
Very
inspectors
low.
is low. I agree.
I really like that answer, to be honest.
Me too. And I want to throw the same question at you, Patrick. First of all, how do they get hold of you, and how does somebody know that they have a good attorney?
We have 30 seconds left. You can ask me that question.
Sorry.
My number, 773-632-8330. Call or text. If you get a good feeling from the lawyer when you're talking to them, that's a really good first start. If they answer the phone when you call them, that's a really good first start. From there, we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Then we'll
Another
get it on the next
cliffhanger.
week.
Another cliffhanger.
All right, and again, I want to thank everybody for listening. Special thank yous go to Devin Tingle, our producer over here at WCPT AM 820. I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors, 312-544-9180. Again, my name is Charlie, and we are out.